The machine had never read zero before, not once. In 40 years of operation across 912 recruits from 37 different species, the fear response calibrator had always something, always. Even the Vorkai warriors, the ones who laughed at pain, had registered at least a 14 on the baseline scale. The machine read zero, then it read zero again. Then the diagnostic system assumed it was broken. It wasn't broken. The human was just laughing. Galactic Coalition Psychological Warfare and Resilience Institute. Station Umbral. Deep orbit, no sunlight by design. The institute existed for one purpose: to find the breaking point. Every species had one. The institute's job was to find it, map it, and then train soldiers to operate just before that edge without falling over. Director Sorvan had run the institute for 14 years. He was a Keth. Patient, methodical, unsentimental. He believed deeply and professionally that every mind had a structural limit, a point past which it could not function. His entire career was built on that belief. And then the Coalition sent him recruit James Okafor, human, 26 years old, former civilian search and rescue operator, no military background. Sorvan had read the file 3 times. He still didn't understand why they'd sent him here. The institute trained psychological warfare specialists, people who could resist interrogation, fear induction, reality distortion. People made of something harder than ordinary. The human had no relevant credentials. He had a search and rescue certification and a note in his file that said, referred by Field Commander Yellen after operational incident. See attached. Sorvan had read the attached report. Then he'd requested the human be sent immediately. James Okafor arrived on a Tuesday. He was medium height, medium build, the kind of person your eyes slide off in a crowd. He had an easy, open face. He smiled at the intake officer. He smiled at the security drone. He smiled at Sorvan when they met in the processing corridor. Director, he said, great facility, very ominous, love the lack of windows. Sorvan looked at him. Recruit Okafor, he said. James is fine. Recruit Okafor, Sorvan said again. Do you know what this institute does? Psychological resilience training, James said. Fear, response calibration, resistance to coercive pressure, that kind of thing. Yes, sounds great, James said. When do we start? Sorvan studied him. The other recruits currently in processing were keeping their distance from the walls. Station Umbral had been specifically designed to be unsettling. The lighting was slightly wrong. The angles were slightly wrong. It produced a low-level unease in most species within minutes of arrival. Standard orientation response in new arrivals. Elevated alertness, reduced social engagement, physical tension. James Okafor was smiling at a security drone. Processing begins at 0800 tomorrow, Sorvan said. Perfect, James said. Is there somewhere I can get food? I haven't eaten since the transit. The current cohort had 11 recruits, 7 species, all of them with impressive credentials, former soldiers, intelligence operatives, high-stress specialists, people who had been selected because they had already demonstrated unusual psychological resilience in the field. And then there was James. The recruits ate together the first evening, the way new cohorts do, careful, evaluating. Ethereal named Commander Candidate Vrix sat across from James. Vrix had survived a 40-hour Draxan interrogation without breaking. She was not easily impressed. She looked at James. Search and rescue, she said. It wasn't quite a question. That's me, James said. You've never served in a military capacity? Nope. Never been under formal enemy action. I mean, I've been in some fairly spectacular collapses. 1 avalanche, 2 building failures, a cave system that decided it didn't want people in it anymore. Vrix stared. Natural disasters, she said, mostly. James said, sometimes people were responsible for the collapses. Does that count? That is not the same as enemy action. Okay, James said pleasantly. What's the food situation here? Do they accommodate human nutrition requirements, or is it going to be the protein brick situation? Vrix looked at the other recruits. They looked back. No one knew what to do with this. The processing chamber. Sorvan stood at the front. His lead researcher, Dr. Tan, a slight precise Keth with permanent ink stains on 3 of her 4 hands, stood beside him with a data tablet. 11 recruits seated. James in the 3rd row. He had found a way to make the entirely rigid Coalition standard seating look comfortable. "Welcome to the Institute," Sorvan said. He did not say it warmly. "You are here because your files suggest you have unusual psychological durability. The Institute's program exists to test that suggestion, refine what is real, and eliminate what is not." He paused. "Not all of you will complete this program." He let that land. It landed differently on different people. Some recruits straightened slightly. Some went still. James tilted his head. "How's the historical pass rate?" he said. Sorvan looked at him. 41%, he said. James said, thoughtfully. Not anxiously. "Does that concern you, recruit?" Dr. Tan said. "I'm trying to figure out if it's the program that's hard or the selection that's off," James said. 41% is pretty low. Either you're selecting wrong or the test is broken. The room went very still. "The program is not broken," Sorvan said. "I'm not saying it is," James said. "I'm saying one of those two things explains 41%, worth knowing which." Sorvan studied him. Dr. Tan was writing something on her tablet. "We will begin with baseline assessments," Sorvan said. "Can't wait," James said. The fear response calibrator. Sorvan had acquired it from a Vorkai military research program. It was, as far as he knew, the most precise instrument of its kind in coalition space. It measured fear response across 17 physiological markers simultaneously: cardiovascular, neurological, endocrine, muscular, tension, pupil response, respiratory, dermal conductivity. It produced a composite score. The scale ran from 0 to 1,000, average sentient baseline under standard conditions 40 to 60, under mild threat stimulus 100 to 150, under severe threat stimulus 300 to 500. The Institute's training target was to get recruits functioning effectively above 350. The Institute record, held by a Draxan former interrogation specialist, was operating effectively at 680. That was the record. The machine had never read below 14. Until James. The calibration session was individual. Each recruit went in alone. The chamber was designed with precision. Specific visual stimuli, specific audio frequencies, specific atmospheric pressure variations. Each element calibrated to produce measurable fear response across multiple species. The session ran for 12 minutes. It started mild. It did not end mild. By the end, most recruits were sitting with elevated cardiovascular readings, heightened cortisol, and the specific muscle tension profile associated with active threat assessment. Normal. Expected. Baseline data. Fricks came out with a reading of 108, which was excellent. She was quietly proud of that. Then James went in. Dr. Tan monitored from outside. She watched the readings. First 2 minutes. 42. Low normal baseline. Expected. Escalation stimulus activated. Reading 46. Dr. Tan checked the system. System was functioning. Second escalation. Reading 44. She checked again. Third escalation, the phase where most recruits crossed 150. Reading 41. Dr. Tan stood very still. She looked at the diagnostic panel. Everything was working. From inside the chamber, she heard something. A sound she had not heard from this room before. Laughter. Not hysterical laughter, not the strange laughter of a breaking mind. Warm, genuine, actually amused laughter. Final reading, 38. James came out of the chamber. He was still smiling. He looked at Dr. Tan. "The sound design in there is really good," he said. "The low frequency layering under the visual stimulus. That's clever. Who designed it?" Dr. Tan was staring at her tablet. "Recruit," she said. "James, recruit Okafor." The calibrator recorded a composite score of 38. "Okay," he said. "The baseline minimum recorded in 14 years is 14. So I'm above minimum," he said. The score of 14 belonged to a Draxan Berserker class operative who had undergone 17 years of psychological conditioning. A pause. "And I beat him?" James said. "You scored higher," she said carefully. "Higher means more fear response. You scored lower. 38 is the lowest score we have ever recorded." "Oh," James said. "Were you not affected by the chamber?" James thought about it. I noticed what it was trying to do. The audio frequency thing is interesting. I've read about infrasonic fear induction. We used low-frequency emitters sometimes to locate trapped survivors. It creates a similar physical sensation, chest pressure, hair standing up. Once I recognized the mechanism, I kind of just shrugged. It didn't feel dangerous anymore, just mechanical. Dr. Tan wrote this down. Her hand was moving fast. And the visual stimuli, she said. The ones at the end? With the distorted geometry, yes. My uncle has a funhouse mirror collection, James said. I've been looking at distorted geometry since I was 4. Dr. Tan stopped writing. She looked at him for a long moment. Come with me, she said. Sorvan's office. James sat across from him. Dr. Tan paced. She had been pacing since the calibration results. 38, Sorvan said. That's what I hear, James said. You laughed. I realized what the sound was doing, and it seemed, I don't know, it seemed like meeting someone's magic trick. After you know how it works, you still appreciate it. Sorvan looked at Dr. Tan. She shook her head slightly. She didn't have an explanation ready yet. The attached report, Sorvan said, from Field Commander Yellen. Tell me about the Brekar Station incident. James was quiet for a moment. Something moved across his face. Not fear, something older. Collapsed habitat ring, he said. 14 people trapped. My team had 2 with partial structure training and me. Standard coalition rescue response time for that sector was 6. What happened? Sorvan said. Ring was still moving. Structural failure in progress. Not a static rescue scenario. It was like trying to find people inside something that was still deciding where to stop. And I went in, James said simply. Sorvan looked at the report. Recruit entered actively destabilizing structure without safety line. Unstable atmosphere. Unknown secondary collapse risk. Extracted 4 survivors across 3 separate entries. Structural integrity failed completely on 4th exit. Recruit cleared collapse zone with final survivor by margin of approximately 2 seconds. Sorvan looked up. You went into an active collapse, he said. 4 times. 3.5, James said. The 4th time it collapsed while I was coming out, with 2 seconds of margin, approximately. He paused. It might have been 3. The report says Field Commander Yellen's exact words were, Sorvan checked the document. I have served for 22 years and I have never seen anything like this, and I need someone to explain it to me. James smiled. Yellen is a good commander. Very thorough. He referred you here because he didn't understand your fear response, Sorvan said. Or rather the absence of it. I was scared, James said. Sorvan paused. You were? Sure, first entry especially. After that I was pretty focused. What changed between the first and second entry? James thought. I knew more about the structure, he said. The first time you go in, you don't know what you're dealing with. Second time, I had information. Third time, I had a map in my head. He shrugged. Fear is mostly uncertainty for me. Once I know what I'm actually dealing with, it gets quieter. The office was silent. Dr. Tan had stopped pacing. She was staring at her tablet, and then at James, and then at her tablet. What is your background, she said, before search and rescue? Engineering degree, 3 years of mountain rescue, 1 year of urban search work on Earth before the coalition program. And before any of that? Grew up in Lagos, he said. Big city, busy. Loud, he smiled. A lot of variables. The program ran 12 weeks. Sorvan had designed it over many years. Phase 1, baseline stress exposure. Phase 2, fear induction and recovery. Phase 3, compound pressure. Multiple simultaneous stressors. Phase 4, isolation and cognitive degradation. Phase 5, the final assessment, which was classified. Most recruits broke somewhere in Phase 3. Not permanently, not catastrophically, but measurably, demonstrably, they found the edge. And then the program spent the remaining weeks training them to work right up to that edge. But the human Sorvan had a problem. He couldn't find the edge. And Phase 1, standard stress exposure, controlled chaos. Loud, visually complex, high information load. Most recruits spent Phase 1 developing coping mechanisms, learning to filter, prioritize, manage overwhelm. James spent Phase 1 looking interested. He didn't develop coping mechanisms. He didn't need to filter. He processed everything, all of it. Simultaneously, Sorvan watched from the observation deck. The standard Phase 1 scenario had 11 simultaneous input streams: audio, visual, tactile, chemical trace, data feeds. Average recruit conscious processing, 3 to 4 streams. The rest went into background processing and overwhelm. James was processing all 11. Not quickly. He wasn't faster than the ethereal recruits, but simultaneously he was holding all 11 streams in active awareness and switching between them without loss. How is he doing that? Sorvan said. Dr. Tan was already deep in the data. I've been looking at human cognitive architecture, she said. Humans have an unusual attentional system. Most species have high focus attention, strong, narrow beam, very effective within its range, significant blind spots outside it. And humans? Humans have what their researchers call diffuse attention. Broader field, lower individual resolution, but capable of simultaneous low-level monitoring across a much wider range. Evolved for what? Environment monitoring, she said. Their ancestral environment had threats from multiple directions simultaneously. Predators, weather, other humans, resource sources. She watched James on the monitor. He grew up in a very large city, she said. Dense population, high noise level, multiple languages, high traffic density. She paused. From childhood, he trained his diffuse attention on one of the most complex human environments available. Lagos, Sorvan said. Lagos, she confirmed. So phase 1 is comparatively quiet, she said. Phase 2, fear induction. This was more sophisticated than the calibration chamber. Personalized stimuli. Sorvan's team had spent the week between phases building a specific fear profile for each recruit. They used their history, their physiology, their demonstrating responses. They found the specific shapes of each person's fear, and then they built a room from those shapes. For Vrix, it was isolation. Deep, total isolation. For the Keth recruit, it was sound, a specific frequency combination that bypassed rational processing. For the Draxan, it was loss of physical capability. They found everyone's thing. For James, the profile was harder to build. The team ran 17 sessions of observational mapping. They got fragments. He had a notable response to enclosed spaces, not severe, but measurable. He had an elevated response to certain auditory patterns associated with structural stress, the sound of metal under tension. He had a strong response to one specific trigger. Helplessness, not danger, not pain, not isolation, helplessness. The specific state of being in a situation with no available action. That's interesting, James said when Dr. Tan mentioned this later. Is it accurate? She asked. He said, danger is manageable, you do things. Helplessness is, yeah, that's the one. Why? He was quiet. Search and rescue, he said finally. You go in because there's something to do. The worst moments aren't the dangerous ones. The worst moments are when you're standing outside and you can hear someone and you can't reach them and there's nothing to do but wait. He was somewhere else for a moment. I hate waiting, he said. The phase 2 chamber. For James, they built it carefully. The enclosed space. The sounds of structural stress. And the central element, a scenario where he was present, aware, and unable to act. It ran for 45 minutes, the longest phase 2 session they had ever run. The calibrator readings climbed, not to the heights they expected, but they climbed. By minute 20, James was at 112. By minute 30, 140. By minute 40, 167, the highest he had ever registered, still below Vrix's calibration baseline, but real. Actually real. Dr. Tan was watching. The readings were climbing, but they weren't spiking. They weren't approaching the non-functional zone. He was processing the fear, slowly and continuously, like a system running a load it was built for. Not comfortably. James came out of phase 2. He sat down. He was quiet for about 30 seconds. Then he looked at Dr. Tan. The helplessness scenario, he said. Was that the real test or the cover test? She blinked. What? The structural sounds and the enclosed space. Those felt like setup. Priming the baseline. The helplessness piece in the middle was the actual thing. He paused. Was the helplessness scenario real, or was there actually something I could have done if I'd looked harder? Dr. Tan looked at him for a long time. Why does it matter? She said carefully. Because if there was something I could have done and I missed it, that's useful information, he said. If there genuinely wasn't anything, that's also useful. Different lesson? She said nothing. There was something I could have done, he said, not a question. Yes, she said quietly. He nodded slowly. What was it, he said. She told him. He listened carefully, he said. He was quiet for a moment. Can I run it again? She stared. The phase 2 scenario. Now that I know there was an action available, I want to practice finding it faster. Sorvan had been listening from the corridor. He stepped in. That is not the protocol, he said. James looked at him. I know, James said, but I missed something. I'd like to not miss it again. The purpose of Phase 2 is to find your fear response range. You found it, James said. 167. Now I want to know what I can build on top of it. Sorvan and Dr. Tan looked at each other. That is Phase 3, Sorvan said, which begins next week. I know, James said. I'd like to start. Phase 3 was the one that broke people. Multiple simultaneous stressors, physical discomfort, psychological pressure, sleep disruption, information overload, all running together for extended periods. The record for sustained Phase 3 was 41 hours by Vorkai, former Special Operations Officer. After 41 hours, he had been non-functional. Functional limit was the target. Sorvan ran the cohort through Phase 3 as a group. He wanted to see how they interacted under compound stress, whether social bonds helped or failed, whether leadership emerged or collapsed. He also wanted to watch what the human did. Hour 1. The cohort was in the pressure environment in 1. High gravity, 1.3, standard institute setting. Low level aversive audio, not painful, just present. Constant, variable lighting, never quite right. High task load, continuous assessment requirements, no clear rest period. The cohort was beginning to show strain. Small things, shorter responses, increased error rate on assessments, physical tension. James was talking to Vrix, which was unusual. Phase 3 was designed to create social fragmentation. People got irritable, withdrew. James was talking to Vrix. You're clenching your jaw, he said. I am aware, Vrix said. It's the audio, he said. Your species processes that frequency range as threat signal. It's cumulative. You've been clenching for about 2 hours. She looked at him. How do you know this? She said. I looked up ethereal physiology last week. He paused. Also, you've been doing it. And your recommendation, she said flatly. There's a pressure point in the secondary jaw joint. Here, he indicated on his own face. I learned it for avalanche survivors who'd been clenching through trauma. He paused. If you apply pressure for 30 seconds, it resets the reflex. Vrix stared. You want to press on my jaw, she said. Only if you want. I'm saying it works. A beat. Vrix applied pressure. 30 seconds, she felt the clench release. Something she had been carrying for 2 hours gone. She looked at James. How did you know that would translate across species? She said. I didn't, he said. I thought it probably would, since the jaw mechanics are similar. But I wasn't certain, and if it hadn't worked, then I'd have apologized and we'd have tried something else, he said. Seemed worth trying. He moved on, went to the Keth recruit, said something about the audio frequency, suggested something, moved to the next person. On the observation deck, Sorvan watched. He's running maintenance on the cohort, Dr. Tan said. During Phase 3, Sorvan said, he spent his free week studying the physiology and psychology of every other recruit in the cohort. Why? I asked him that, she said. He said, because if we're all stressed together, it helps to know what everyone's dealing with. Sorvan watched the cohort. The fragmentation was lower than expected, significantly lower, because someone was moving through it like a field medic, applying small, precise interventions, keeping the group functional. He's managing the collective fear response, Sorvan said slowly. He's treating it as a resource management problem, Dr. Tan said. The cohort's functional capacity is the resource. Stress is the drain. He's reducing the drain while experiencing his own stress load. His readings are at 180, she said, sustained without spike. She paused. He's running high personal load and doing this simultaneously. How? Sorvan said. She thought for a moment. I think, she said, that helping the others is part of how he manages his own stress. The action reduces his helplessness response. Giving him something to do with the fear changes its nature. Hour 22. Most of the cohort was at functional edge, not broken. But right at the limit, James was at 220 on the calibrator, his highest ever. But he was still functioning, still precise on the assessments, still moving through the cohort, still finding the thing that needed doing and doing it. Sorvan introduced the next element, loss of information. The assessment data started degrading, feeds dropped. Readings became unreliable. You couldn't tell what was real and what was instrument error. Most species found this profoundly disorienting. Certainty about the environment was foundational to stress management. Remove certainty, and the stress load increased dramatically. The cohort's calibrator readings spiked across the board. James paused. He looked at the degraded feed. He looked around the room. He said, "Okay, just that, okay." And he started working from what he could verify directly. Not the instruments, the room, the people, what he could see and hear and touch. He rebuilt a functional picture from primary observation. He shared it with the cohort. "I don't trust the feeds right now," he said. "Here's what I can actually confirm." He went through it. Calm, specific, useful. The cohort spike readings came down, not to baseline, but down. They had an anchor, the human, functioning at 220, carrying his own weight, and somehow still being the anchor. Hour 38, 3 recruits had hit their limit, not failed. Just reached the functional boundary. They were pulled from the exercise. No shame in it. That was the program. 8 recruits remained, including James. Sorvan had expected to see him slow down by now, get quieter. More internal, less outward-facing. That was the typical late-phase pattern even for the strongest recruits. They survived by contracting. James wasn't contracting. He was different, yes. Quieter in one way, but more present in another, like something that had been burning off. Surface noise was gone, and what was left was very clear, very still, very functional. Sorvan came down from the observation deck. He walked into the pressure environment, which he did not normally do. He walked up to James. "Recruit," he said. "Director," James said. His voice was tired but even. "How are you doing?" Sorvan asked. It was not a clinical question. James looked at him. "Honestly," he said. "Honestly, I'm tired," he said. "And I'm at the part where my brain really wants to find a reason to stop." He paused. "So I'm being careful not to look too hard for one." Sorvan was quiet for a moment. "What keeps you going?" he said. James looked at the remaining recruits. "Them," he said simply. "And," he paused, "there's a part of this that's interesting. The degraded information environment. You're forcing us to operate on primary observation." He almost smiled. "I actually think that's a better way to work, not just here. Generally." Sorvan looked at him. This exhausted, steady 220 calibrator human, finding it interesting. "You find this interesting," Sorvan said. "I find most things interesting," James said. "It helps." Hour 44, James was the last one standing. Not dramatically, not heroically. He was sitting on the floor, actually, working on an assessment, methodically, getting it right. The other 7 had reached their limits, good limits, strong ones. The program had found their edges, and James was still going. Calibrator 248, highest sustained reading ever recorded. Functional, precise, finishing the assessment. Sorvan did the exercise. "Phase 3 complete," he said. "Recruits are dismissed to rest." James looked up. "I can keep going," he said. "I know," Sorvan said. "We're done." James got up slowly, stretched. He looked at Sorvan with those clear, tired eyes. "What's the record?" he said. "You now hold it," Sorvan said, "by 3 hours. James nodded. "What did the previous record holder do differently than me?" he said. Sorvan stared. "You just set the program record," he said. "By 3 hours. I know. I want to know what the previous holder did that worked well. I'm always looking for what I can learn from people who were good at something." Sorvan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, he contracted. He narrowed his focus completely to his own internal state and managed it with precision. "And that got him further than I'd have gotten without the cohort to focus on," James said. "Probably," Sorvan admitted. "So his method is better for solo operation?" "Probably." James nodded, filed it. "Good to know." He went to sleep. The final assessment. Sorvan did not tell the recruits what it was. He never did. He called them in one by one. When James came in, the room was empty except for Sorvan. One chair, one small table. Sorvan sat across from him. "The final assessment," Sorvan said, "is a conversation." James waited. "I'm going to tell you something," Sorvan said, "and I want your honest response." "Okay," James said. "In 14 years running this program," Don said, "I have trained 912 recruits. I have found the breaking point of each of them. I have mapped the structural limits of 912 minds." He paused. "I cannot find yours." James said nothing. "Not because you don't have one. You do." The helplessness response, the uncertainty threshold, they're real, they're mappable. "But," James said, "but every time I find the edge, you build something on it. You don't defend the edge. You use it as a foundation." Sorvan looked at him with something that had been there for 3 weeks, something he had been trying to name. I don't know how to train you, because you arrive at every session having already incorporated the previous session. There is no lag. There is no recovery period where the learning settles. You are simply always already ahead. James was quiet. I'm not sure that's entirely true, he said. I missed the action in Phase 2 until you told me. Yes, Sorvan said, and then you asked to run it again, immediately. I hate missing things, James said. I know, Sorvan said. That is the point. He leaned forward. The final assessment is a question. One question. Answer it honestly, okay? Are you afraid of anything? Sorvan said. A long silence. James looked at the table, at his hands. Not doing enough, he said finally. That's the one. Not danger, not pain, not failure in the usual sense. He paused. I'm afraid of standing somewhere with something left in me and not having used it. The room was quiet. That is why you went into Brecker Station 4 times, Sam, Sorvan said. That's why I went back each time, James said. Not the first time. First time I went because there were people in there. I went back because I could, because you had something left. Yes, Sorvan was quiet for a long time. He said, is the answer I have been looking for 14 years. James looked at him. What do you mean? Every recruit who has passed this program, Sorvan said, has learned to manage their fear, contain it, work around it, work through it. They are remarkable. They are the best we produce, he paused. But they are all, at some level, working against something, managing a force that runs contrary to their function. He looked at James. You are not working against anything. Your fear and your function run in the same direction. The fear of not doing enough produces doing more. The anxiety about missing something produces studying everything. The dread of helplessness produces the compulsion to find an action always. James was quiet. Your fear, Sorvan said, is the engine, not the obstacle. A long silence. Is that the assessment, James said. That is the result, Sorvan said. The assessment was whether you knew it. I didn't, James said. Not in those words. No, Sorvan said. Most people don't. It takes someone else to see the shape of you from outside. He stood up. You pass, he said, with the highest composite score in the program's history. James nodded slowly. He didn't celebrate, he thought. The other recruits, he said. The ones who ran out of time in Phase 3, they're good. They are excellent, Sorvan said. They have the same fear and function alignment, James said. In some of them, I could see it. Sorvan paused. You could. The way she fights, she's not managing fear of the opponent. She's afraid of losing the fight. It goes the same direction. Yes, Sorvan said slowly. Do they know that about themselves, James asked. Sorvan thought. Not yet, he said. James nodded. That seems like something worth telling them, he said. The report Sorvan filed was 40 pages. He filed it to the Coalition General Staff. He filed it to the Coalition Xenopsychology Division. He filed it to the Department of Species Assessment. He also filed a personnel recommendation, which was unusual for Sorvan. He had filed one personnel recommendation in 14 years. This was the second. It read, Recruit James Okafor, Terran Human, Program Record, All Metrics, Recommendation, Retain for Program Staff. Reason, he already knows things about your recruits that you don't. He will find your edges. He will also find things worth building on them. The combination is rare. In 14 years and 912 recruits, it is in fact singular. He paused. He thought about a man sitting on the floor at hour 44, finishing an assessment, getting it right. Finding it interesting, he added one more line. Additionally, and I recognize this is outside standard reporting format, I would suggest the Coalition review its species classification of Terran humans, not because they are without fear, but because they have found something the rest of us have not. They have found a way to be afraid and move toward it anyway, as a matter of instinct, as a matter of preference, as simply what they do. Whatever you call that. We should have more of it.